Hello, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Alec McCutcheon from Unicom, and we're delighted to be hosting today's session, which is a fireside chat. We're running it in partnership with our good friends from HeadSpin. The topic today is all about perfecting digital experiences in industrial enterprises to drive productivity, flexibility, and safety. So I really hope you enjoy the session. It's going to be fascinating, and there's going to be opportunity for questions. So please do type your questions into the chat box as well. What I will do now is hand over to our colleagues from HeadSpin, who will introduce the panelists and tell you more about the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Alec. Thank you for that. And thank you, Unicom, for helping us host this interesting fireside chat. Good morning and good evening, everyone, depending on wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this fireside chat. We're thrilled to have all of you here for what I think is going to be one of the most insightful fireside chats around 5G revolution in the industrial space. I'm Pratita, the product marketing manager at HeadSpin, and it's an honor for me to be able to drive this conversation with two technology and business experts we have today. Arun Agarwal, who's the SVP for Business Technology, CIO, and board member Industrial Enterprises. He's an experienced technology leader who's also passionate about digitalization, innovation, and technologies. As the former CIO of Cemex and SVP at Fortum's Business Technology Division, he has supported and enabled Fortum's vision for a cleaner world for digitalization and innovation. Welcome, Arun, and thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we also have with us our very own HeadSpin's Chief Operating Officer, Gaurav Mathur, who's a senior technology leader with over 25 years of experience, has worked with customers globally to help them build, test, and manage flawless digital experiences for the end users. Welcome, you, Gaurav. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so before we begin, I'd like to encourage all the attendees to please feel free to share questions during the course of the webinar. We'll have them directed to either Gaurav or Arun and have them answered for you. With that, let's begin. So just to set the context, with the advent of 5G, the world has drastically changed in the way consumers consume and interact with content. With 5G's key features of ultra-low latency, extensive network capacity, improved bandwidth, and higher data speed, it has definitely resulted in a much better connected world. Consumers are consuming content on the go. 5G has become much more mature and enabled a one universe, one connected world sort of a thing where there are a vast number of devices on the edge, and still we seem to be well connected, all of us from different parts of the world. But what does 5G really entail for the industrial sector? Are there any challenges with the complexity of the number of devices, the OS versions, the feature releases that exist today, and how can industries really leverage 5G by overcoming these challenges? Would love to hear your thoughts on this, Arun.
Thanks, Pratita. I think 5G has definitely revolutionized the consumer space. Back at some point, we thought if you wanted to watch a good TV show, you had to sit at home on your couch, watch it on your TV connected via a wired connection. And today you're watching it on 5G with the same quality wherever you possibly are. And slowly, a lot of consumer technology is now starting to make its way backwards into industry, which is maybe a bit slower to adopt these technologies. But we're starting to see in industry adoption of 5G, and you're starting to see this in various industries, and you're seeing new products coming out. You're starting to see telco companies tailoring their 5G network to sell network slices to various companies that want to have a private 5G network to connect different locations, to connect different devices, to enable different applications for the users. We're starting to see companies put in campus-wide 5G networks to enable their workers to work on different things. And with all of this, they're putting out a lot of new devices. So on one side, they're connecting IoT gateways, IoT equipment to send data back. On the other side, they're connecting users who have specialized applications that they're using to make use of that data, to make decisions, take actions. And on the other side, they're sending command data back to these devices to execute autonomously. Some examples, when we go to a port today, there's a huge amount, you have ships sending automatically data to the port on what they're carrying, where the containers need to go. That then pre-positions the big gantry cranes and the stacker cranes to be in the right location. People in the port get positioned as to where they need to be to unload containers. Trucks that are coming in get data onto which containers they need to pick up and relocate. And all of that is connected through a web of systems, devices, and data and applications for users. When we go to a power plant today, there's actually very few employees. There's a 5G network very often, or a Wi-Fi network. And a Wi-Fi network sometimes doesn't work as well because the size of a power plant, that the 5G is a better, more secure solution. And almost everything in that plant is remotely monitored, remotely operated. When we go into the logistics business, you have thousands of drivers driving trucks every day connected over 4G and 5G networks, being told where to go, where to deliver a product, being able to have the dispatcher track the truck in real time, maintenance being able to track the performance of the truck, safety being able to do that, customers being able to do that, being able to take proof of delivery, whether that is pictures, etc., in real time, and initiate billing processes when deliveries are done. So we're starting to see 5G starting to change industry. And industry is new in using this huge distributed system. And the applications they're building are becoming very complex. So there's a lot of testing that is needed to make sure that everything works perfectly. Because even though in the industrial environment, something you put out there as media content may not get consumed by 1 million people, and if it doesn't work, the user has a bad experience. In the industrial context, if the right message does not get to a person, a factory worker may enter into a zone that is not safe and that may have harm to life and limb. So, different types of impacts, but again, the criticality that everything has to work. It has to work right. You cannot leave things to chance. So Gaurav, one of the things that is you have been developing solutions, so many across the years. Can you talk a little bit about how you test such complex systems to make sure that the end user, everything works for him, from his last mile connectivity to the connectivity to the server, to what's on the cloud, and all of the different points in between?
Yeah, Arun, thank you very much for that. And it's a pleasure and privilege to be with you again. Let me start by saying that, a customer churn is just a bad click away. As we all know, in this digital world, especially post-pandemic, the margin for error does not exist anymore. No matter how good the product or service that you're offering through your digital channel, if the experience is bad, then that can disenfranchise the end user, be it a customer or an employee. And majority of people now rate the experience they get on the digital channel as important as the product and the service. However, the end user is, the irony is that the end user is at the end of a very long chain. There are servers in the cloud, there is data at the edge, and then there is Wi-Fi and 5G being the last mile of connectivity. So because of the complexity of all these factors across the different layers of the technology stack, I believe that it's absolutely essential to test the user experience pre-release, as opposed to waiting to deploy a piece of software out in the environment and then getting a feedback either through some online forum that experience was bad, or the customer not coming again at all because they will just get completely disillusioned. And Arun, I remember before the pandemic, when we were in Helsinki together, we were talking about how important this is for the energy sector, as it's going through a major transformation and revolution. So would be quite keen to get your views on how you see the importance of this and the various use cases in the energy and utility space.
God, there's so many use cases. Let me just try to take a couple of use cases and talk through them. The big shift that's happening in the utility sector as industry and energy companies look to decarbonize is we're seeing a huge penetration of renewable energy. And renewable energy is not this one big centralized power plant someplace. It is wind parks, solar power plants. It is hydropower plants. It is battery storage that is distributed all over geographically. And it has to be managed very effectively because the energy system has to always be in balance. On one side, you have demand, and one side you have production. If you underproduce, well, there's going to be a blackout, or the frequency of energy won't be at the 50 or 60 hertz you expect. If you produce too much, well, you have to dump it somewhere because you're going to overload the power lines. So you really need to orchestrate all of this in real time. And energy sources like renewables are not by themselves very flexible. So what we're starting to see is all of these energy sources are now being connected to centralized operation centers, where you have real-time streaming data from all the sensors in a wind turbine, all of the sensors in a solar panel coming in. On the other side, you have data coming in from the grid in terms of capacity and any grid problems. On the other side, you have weather data coming in telling you what your forecast production is going to be, because if it's going to get cloudy, your production will go down, etc. And then on the other side, you have market data with real-time prices coming in. And all of this has to then be analyzed to make a decision as to operate an asset. The signal has to be sent back to that asset. And this chain has to work flawlessly, because if it doesn't, energy doesn't get produced. You have a problem. Consumers don't have energy. And today, you can't live without it. So we're starting to see a tremendous amount of solutions being put in to connect all of these assets, to use digital technologies to perform these things. And then as we try to drive costs down, you don't really have a standing labor force in power plants anymore. If something is detected as a problem or a failure, things may be remotely shut down, and an app is used to dispatch a worker who's given a very specific work order to go into this part of a plant between this time and this time, execute a task, provide the evidence that the task was executed, and leave the power plant. And all of that has to be managed. So we're starting to see this huge connected ecosystem to just get a power system working. And all of this is creating new challenges. And I've been in situations where literally one configuration change to one router somewhere that should have had no impact somehow breaks down the communication between the control center and the power plant. And all of a sudden you have to, on an emergency basis, rush workers in to operate that power plant because the remote operations are not working. And then it has taken us, because we didn't have great testing tools that instrumented the entire chain, it's taken us half a day to diagnose where the problem was. And when the problem is an intermittent problem because of incompatibility between two networks and an app and a piece of device, it is hell to find that answer.
Exactly, yeah. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. I mean, the use case you were mentioning there, it's so important. I mean, if there is something working wrong in a machine or in a plant, and that signal goes to the command center, then the command center is sending probably even a video of what's happening wrong to an engineer on the field. So the engineer is seeing that input, which might be in the form of text, video, or audio, so that the engineer can get a, even before they plan the visit, they can have an idea of what could be the problem. They may also then want to access a central repository to say, for example, look at a manual or look at past cases, how similar situation was resolved. This is all about making the adequate preparation before they go onto the site, and then they perform the repair or the maintenance that they need to do. And once they've concluded that, then they have to feed back the results of what they did, how did they solve the problem. And again, that could involve sending communication through their mobile app in the form of text, audio, and video back to the command center. So this whole chain, at any point, if the experience is not flawless, it can have huge implications on either the productivity of the employee, or the decisions that you at the command center need to make to bring back operations to the desired levels of safety and also productivity.
Yeah. And in order to do that, one of the important things, and I think, Gaurav, this is something that you all work on quite a bit, is that even though you can test all the bits and pieces, the proof of the pudding is in the final testing when you test the entire system together. Yeah. Unfortunately, you can't do that with live users. You can't decide to make a new deployment and see, let's see what happens in a live wind turbine. So you need some kind of device at the edge that can simulate the end device, so you can test the whole thing end to end and make sure it works. And that is not just test, but then it is continuously monitor it, so that if something goes wrong, you're alerted very quickly. Not something goes wrong with the wind turbine, but with the entire technology chain that connects the wind turbine, the grid, the persons working on it, with the consumer, and make sure all of it works. One other interesting case study, just from an example, and this is of a startup that I helped build when I was at my last employer. We talk about car charging, and people think that if I want to charge my car, it should be simple. I drive up to a charging point, I put a card in or something like that, and I plug in my car and go. Unfortunately, the car charging industry quite doesn't work like that. As a consumer, when you go to a car charging, you're normally using an app to get there. And that app is generally provided by something what we call a EMP, which is a type of provider that aggregates all of the different car charging stations in a region onto a nice, usable application. When you go there, you say, hey, I want to use this car charger. That EMP has to then contact the owner of the car charger. The owner of the car charger has to give you data as to what is the waiting time, what is the cost. They have to get that based on the price of electricity. Then that authentication is to go back, and then we need to connect to a payment provider that says, hey, can you pay this? So by the time you decide you want to charge a car, we have had to coordinate the actions of at least 3 to 4 companies to make that happen. And this has been so frustrating that if you look at EV owners, finding a car charger is not the biggest problem. Getting you to actually charge your car is the biggest problem. And all of that is because the digital chain to make that transaction happen keeps breaking down. Yeah. And it's very complex because every charging point operator that owns a charger uses a different backend piece of software. They connect via different APIs. And the app is busily trying to orchestrate all of that for you as a user. And the most frustrating thing is when you've got to drop your kid off at school and you have 5% battery left, you want that damn charger to work.
Exactly. Yeah. And I see that could be a big barrier in user adoption. I mean, as we know that governments all around the world have made ambitious commitments that in some stage in 2030s, they want all the cars to be on electric. And I'm a great believer in that. However, if there are these challenges in terms of getting the charge at the right time, at the right place, and of course at the right price, then that is going to inhibit the adoption of electric cars, and which has a huge significant impact on the economy and the environment. So absolutely a very important use case to ensure that the user experience is flawless in that use case.
Yeah.
Moving on to another industry, I mean, very close to your energy and utilities also are the mines and the oil and gas companies. How do you see the testing challenge manifesting itself in that particular segment?
I think the testing challenges are the same. It's interesting to understand the use case of connectivity. When we take a look at the mining industry, for example, mines are generally not located near huge population centers. They're located in some very faraway places where maybe people don't like to go. When you take a look at Australia, mining, it happens in the outback, and it is very difficult to deploy good resources to those sites. So what we're starting to see is much more automation. You have mining equipment that is completely automated, boring equipment, excavating equipment, processing equipment that is fully censored, fully automated, and at the same time has video feeds coming back that remote operators are using, sitting in their offices, maybe in Sydney, and operating that mine. So you're starting to see that connectivity puzzle starting again. And then in that case, again, when something goes wrong with a piece of equipment, you have the real-time video feed of what's wrong. You have an app that is used to dispatch the right repair person who hopefully has diagnosed what is wrong and is going there with the right parts, etc., to fix it. So we're starting to see again in that mining industry a lot of automation. So when we talk about industry and becoming more efficient, more flexible, a lot of it is driven by automation that is based on this flow of data and decisions in both directions. So we're starting to see that in mining. For example, you're starting to see that in exploration functions too. Give you an example. I was at a hydropower plant that produces, hundreds of megawatts of electricity, and that's a couple of kilometer side campus. And the number of employees on site were 2. Everything else was remotely done and operated and managed. So we're starting to see this dependence. And so whether it's a perfect user experience, or if it's a perfect employee experience, or the perfect experience for a connected device, it matters.
Excellent, and very thanks for those inputs. They're very useful. And in terms of the other industry you touched earlier was around ports. So how do you see the challenges around improving safety in port operations or around cargo handling and cargo management?
What we see in ports is, number one, ports are actually one of the areas where there's some of the fastest growing penetration of private 5G networks. A port is actually basically a mini city unto itself. It's a small world, and you take a look at Jebel Ali, Dubai, that place is massive. There is hundreds of thousands of containers being moved around, big, massive equipment being moved, cranes moving equipment, and people going from point A to point B, thousands of trucks coming in every hour to take things places. All of that has to be coordinated. So you have various apps that are given to the truck drivers who come in and get the right access, to port workers who are unloading the ships, to crane operators as to where to take those boxes and place them. All of this has to work flawlessly. Second, in a way, imagine if you have a task to do, you need a license to do that task. So you have the application validating, are you supposed to be in that location at that minute? Are you supposed to be doing that task? And the same thing applies to in the energy sector. In fact, if I take a look at the energy sector, say something breaks down, you're normally given a service ticket where you have, as a contractor, 2-hour window to go in, go fix something and get out. and make sure you follow all the safety checks, document them. All of that's really important, because one of the things we've noticed when we analyze our health and safety record and take a look at all incidents and potential incidents, over half of them happen because the wrong person was doing the wrong task at the wrong time or was in the wrong place. And by the way, because of the way the world is going, it's not just employees that you just talk to. You have hundreds of contractors. So you need technology to coordinate all of them, to check up on every little piece, to go through the checklist, to provide them with real-time video feeds, monitor what they're doing. So you're starting to see this becoming really important, whether it's ports or energy, this system of managing the work that people are doing, especially since we're moving to much more third-party labor that may not have the same training, the same experience as somebody who's been working in the same plant for 30 years might.
Yeah. And what do you think is the role that the telecommunications sector has to do in fulfilling or enabling these use cases in various industrial enterprises? Because ultimately they are, coming, whether they are a telco or they are a network equipment provider, they are, enabling that infrastructure, the 5G, the mobile private networks. What do you see their role and their business imperatives in making sure that there is wider adoption of these technologies that the industrial enterprises require?
Number one, I think that's happening already, because I think the consumer was a great testing ground for 5G. Yeah. And now I think it's been proven to work well enough that industry is adopting it. Obviously, the industry has to provide the products and services, so whether it is slicing network to provide the privacy people want, the private network area, or providing a complete private network on a site, they have to provide that. They have to provide the guarantees of quality of service. They have to provide transparency in the network operations, because the operations of a company now depend on how well you operate your network, and every change you make in your network has a downstream impact on their applications and their devices. So I think there's a new level of integration and interaction that has to happen. Obviously, they also have to support full end-to-end testing and monitoring of this environment. And I think that's something where HeadSpin comes in, because when you test and monitor these environments, you need to do a couple of things. Number one, you have to instrument the entire value chain. You have to instrument the servers in the cloud to the connectivity from the cloud to the local point, from the local point to the end user, and then the device that they're using itself, or the machine, and what is, the gateway on that machine. You have to instrument the entire value chain, and you need to be able to test hundreds of these things through all the time in different locations, because you don't know what's going to be different. And you need real-time data from all of this so you can diagnose the problem in seconds and fix it. So I think the telco providers need to be part of that solution, so that these types of solutions allow you to go in and run all these diagnostics, because otherwise industry won't have the confidence to move to these new technologies.
No, absolutely. And let me also share with you a couple of examples of where we are working with telcos. So we work with a number of telcos globally. Like with one of the telcos in the US, they have set up a 5G hub at one of the airports. And in that hub, they've worked with a cloud provider who has given a solution for edge compute on the edge. And they wanted to test what is the quality of gaming experience, as there are users transiting through the airport. Their expectations are that if they are doing some gaming at the airport in this 5G environment, that the experience is as good as it would be if they are, say, gaming in the comforts of their home. So we provided this solution for them to set up a lab at the airport and test the user experience before it was rolled out. Similarly, we help telcos who are rolling out 5G networks to people's homes, because there again they got to ensure that the experience of when they receive whatever form of media they are consuming at home through a wireless neighborhood network is not as good, but even better than what they are getting through a fixed wireless line. And the way we enable them is, first of all, is that we help them set up the mobile labs on the edge, because when you connect to our HeadSpin platform, you are able to access a plethora of real devices sitting on the edge. So these are not emulators or simulators or sitting in a warehouse in some location, but they are where you want to test the user experience. And there could be different forms of devices: Apple phones, Android phones, different types of browsers, smart TVs like Roku TV, Samsung TV, etc. Because your users are consuming the applications in a different manner. So it's important to ensure that the experience on the different device through which they're consuming is flawless. And then once the test is executed, our data science platform provides insights on more than 130 business KPIs, which helps determine, what's going wrong, either at the application layer, the operating system layer, the network layer, or the device layer, and effectively do a root cause analysis and help you find the needle in a haystack in terms of where you need to go and fix the issue to improve the user experience. And that is something that we have perfected working with large global enterprises, be it digital natives, telcos, gaming companies, auto companies, retail companies, banking, financial services institutions. And we see a lot of use cases based on what you mentioned, Arun, emerging in the industrial sector as well.
Thanks. I think, Gaurav, our time is kind of coming to an end.
Sure.
And for me, as I participate in this, one of the questions I have is maybe more for the audience who's joined us. I'd love to hear, if you're a company that is either a telco that's providing this connectivity to your customers, or you're a gaming company or a media company that is very heavily dependent on that amazing user experience, or you're an industrial company that started to deploy Industry 4.0 type concepts with your automated factory floors, with fully connected knowledge workers. How are you testing all of this works? How are you making sure in real time nothing breaks down? I'd love to hear how you're doing it today, because this has been a challenge that I have struggled with in various roles I have played. It would be great to hear that, and Gaurav and I would love to understand what you're doing today, and potentially see if some of the solutions we have talked about would be a good fit for that.
Okay, so while we have our attendees respond to your question, we also have some questions coming in. So here's the first one. It says, with a spectrum like 5G, while testing may be essential, there are a lot of emulators or simulators in the market that mimic the real world user scenario. Why do you think real devices are essential, considering the huge infrastructural investment that is required for it?
I'll maybe just pick an example. Apple has a huge team of developers, and software is the core of their business. And they do extensive testing on the software that they build. However, whenever they end up deploying a new release of their software in the world, somewhere in the world, something doesn't work. And so nothing replaces real edge testing in different cities, in different countries, in different locations. And even with that, they still find flaws. So that's why I think you need to do this, because you don't know what problems you're going to face in different countries. If you take a look at the problem I mentioned with the power plant, everything on the surface looked fine. That the upgrade to that network component should not have created any issues. And what did we find? Incompatibility with some software running at one power plant somewhere, and that power plant cannot operate anymore or cannot accept commands remotely. And you're not going to find that if you're not doing this end-to-end testing at the edge. Gaurav, thoughts?
No, I absolutely agree with you. And we have seen that in a number of use cases that our customers use us for. Let me give you an example. I mean, if you are trying to grow through across different channels, it's important to ensure that, for example, if you're a media company, that your players are compatible with the different devices in which a consumer is using them. Because if you are not able to ensure that your player works with a certain endpoint device, be it a Roku TV or a Samsung TV, then you've lost that target addressable market completely. So, imperfections out here can have significant impact on your ability to capture the market and grow your revenue. And I think that is why, there is a strong business case to do edge testing using real devices to ensure that you can successfully meet the expectations of your users on the edge and grow your business, and at the same time get the productivity you need to have faster and cheaper software deployment and development life cycles.
Yes, I think if there's one thing that we know is lab testing is not going to work with 5G, with so many different devices at the edge and different network infrastructure across geographies, across the globe. So yeah, thank you for that. We have one more question coming in. It says, why would a telco company be interested in testing the performance of a digital native app, something that consumers use? Wouldn't that be something that mobile app companies invest in?
Gaurav, maybe I'll try to give a couple of scenarios. Number one, a lot of mobile companies, service providers, are actually also app providers. They create digital apps, digital content they want their consumers to use because they want to get that part of the revenue base. They don't want to be dumb pipes, okay? So they have to have this type of testing available for their own applications. Second, if I am a telco, my performance is not measured in some abstract way by the number of bars and the quality of the signal. It is still measured by the end user taking some of the most commonly used apps, whether it is Facebook or Netflix or something. And if it works well, he says, yeah, my connection with Vodafone or with Deutsche Telekom or with AT&T is great. And if it doesn't work and it's stuttering and all that, he's like, I don't like my telco provider. So they have every incentive to test some of these very common digital applications before they roll out any kind of updates to their network, whether they're changing some of the core software that operates their network, changing the configuration, routing of signals. They also want to test it. And when they do that, they have to put in the test infrastructure. The question I have is, one day, will the telcos open this test infrastructure they have to create and put in to the digital companies with the digital apps so they can actually help them do the testing also? Because if they have the infrastructure, well, let the digital providers use it too.
No, I agree with you, Arun. I mean, the first call is made to a telco when things don't work right. And in the conversations I have with customers, it's absolutely important for them to convince um, their uh, their customers that the applications will run in the same manner as they're used to, or probably in a much better manner because of the expectations of lower latency and higher bandwidth. So the onus is then on them to prove to them. And I think it can be a big barrier because unless, for example, if you look at the mobile private network cases, unless that is not proven pre-deployment, a lot of industrial customers, I believe, are not going to move towards accelerating the adoption.
Okay, and then we have one more question from Deb. Says, nice to see you, Arun and Gaurav, while we're handling a huge amount of streaming data. What is your point of view on security posture and design principle in terms of security? Any top level best practices you'd like to see being implemented, since security seems to be a big concern now?
Deb, great to hear you again. Security is a topic we could go on forever, but I can tell you in the industrial space, it's absolutely critical. The data streams that we're sending in the industrial space, especially in the energy sector, have to be safeguarded because changing those data streams opens us up to either getting bad data in. To give an example, if the data stream from a hydropower plant telling us the water level in the reservoir is off, we can technically, and somebody can say it's steady and open the gate, and all of a sudden we're dumping water downriver that we don't know, which could cause flooding downstream. So a man-in-the-middle type attack that basically messes with that streaming data coming back to us, or the command signal data going back down, could cause a huge malfunction. So we have to be very careful about security. And part of the reason I think 5G is becoming more popular because it is inherently more secure than Wi-Fi networks. And it's not possible to get wired networks to every location you want to get to, or it's too cost prohibitive to do that. So what we would love to see is much more attention to security by design, and also the ability to test that security to ensure that people have the confidence that this is going to work. Because when it comes to executives who are not technology focused, they always look at this from a risk perspective, and they have to be convinced that they're willing to accept the risk, or the risk level is actually lower by implementing automation and all of these types of streaming technologies that move data.
Dev, excellent question. And I think recognizing the security need, we have built our platform and offered flexible deployment options, including if you wanted a solution within your firewall, totally air-gapped on your premise, we provide that, as well as secure cloud solutions to make sure that all your security and privacy requirements are met in a compliant manner. Okay, I think, Pradita, we have time for perhaps one more question.
Just one last question we have. This question is, so it says, we as a company have invested a lot in real devices like mobile phones and tablets and laptops for our testers to test. So we basically already have the infrastructure. Does HeadSpin have any capabilities that allow us to use our existing device infrastructure and still use your platform for testing purposes for insights?
Yeah, I'll take that. No, absolutely, we have. And we have a unique solution which we call Create Your Own Lab, where you can actually bring your own devices and you can connect to our platform and get all the benefits of executing the tests from remote locations, and get all the benefits of the data science we provide to help you perfect your user experience. And we build that solution specially recognizing the use cases that we saw with the customers to address the point that they already have the infrastructure. Absolutely.
Perfect. I think with that, we've come to the end of all the questions. Alec, I hope I've covered all the questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Pratisha, and thank you, Arun and Gaurav. It's been a fantastic session. I just really want to wrap up by thanking everybody for attending. It's great to see so many people here today, and we will, in due course, with our friends at HeadSpin, be sharing the recording. So I really hope you enjoyed the session, and we will see you again in the future. Thank you very much indeed. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
So much. Thank you.